Nobody buys Valvoline Daily Protection, thinking they found a hidden gem. It sits at the budget end of the synthetic blend shelf, the kind of oil that ends up in your cart because your local parts store had a display at eye level and the price was right. An AMSOIL Synthetic Blend costs noticeably more, carries a slightly premium reputation, and gets marketed specifically to people who want to do better than conventional without committing to a full synthetic price point. Standard story. But a used oil analysis on both of these bottles after 4,000 miles tells you something that the shelf price does not. The molybdenum reading on Valvoline Daily Protection comes back at 220 to 260 parts per million remaining. AMSOIL Synthetic Blend comes back at 60 to 80 parts per million remaining. That is not a small gap. Valvoline is running 3 to 4 times the friction modifier concentration of AMSOIL inside the same blend category on what the datasheet tells you is a substantially weaker synthetic base. That pairing is the whole story in one number, and understanding why Valvoline made that formulation choice tells you which engine and which driver each oil was actually built for. Molybdenum works at the boundary lubrication zone, the contact patches where the oil film thins out and metal gets closest to metal. At cam lobes, ring faces, lifter contact surfaces, molybdenum disulfide deposits itself as a lamellar layer at those zones, reducing friction even when the hydrodynamic wedge starts to collapse under load. A high molybdenum reading in the fresh oil is Valvoline saying, "We know the base stock has limits, so we are buying protection at the boundary layer with chemistry instead." That works. The wear metals in the used oil analysis confirm it works. Iron comes back at 10 to 16 parts per million, copper at 3 to 6 parts per million, aluminum at 3 to 5 parts per million. Those numbers are not alarming for a 4,000-mile drain. But the base oil composition is where the context for that molybdenum number lives. Valvoline Daily Protection is built primarily on Group 2 conventional base stock with a Group 3 synthetic top-off component. Group 2 base oil is refined mineral oil, cleaner than Group 1, still petroleum. It carries a viscosity index in the range of 90 to 120 and shears under sustained mechanical stress faster than a true synthetic molecular chain. AMSOIL Synthetic Blend explicitly markets its formula as carrying greater than 50% premium synthetic base oils. That is not a marketing footnote, that is a load-bearing specification. Greater than 50% synthetic in a blend category is an unusual commitment, and the viscosity retention numbers in the used oil analysis reflect it directly. The kinematic viscosity at 100 degrees Celsius after use tells you how much the oil has thinned from its fresh baseline. Valvoline Daily Protection comes back at 8.8 to 9.4 centistokes. AMSOIL Synthetic Blend comes back at 9.1 to 9.6 centistokes. Both products are 5W30 oils. Fresh, they sit at roughly the same viscosity window. After 4,000 miles of mechanical shear and thermal cycling, AMSOIL is sitting measurably closer to its original specification. That gap exists because a higher synthetic content resists molecular chain fracture better than a predominantly mineral base under the same thermal load. Fuel dilution tolerance is where that base stock difference becomes a real-world concern, rather than a spec sheet exercise. During cold starts, raw fuel washes past the piston rings and enters the crankcase before combustion. Temperatures reach the point where it burns off completely. In turbocharged direct injection engines specifically, where fuel is injected directly into the combustion chamber and not across the intake valve, that dilution cycle runs on nearly every cold start. A vehicle driven primarily on short trips under 10 to 15 minutes never fully stabilizes the crankcase temperature long enough to evaporate what accumulated during the warm-up cycle. Fuel in the crankcase means thinner oil. Thinner oil means the viscosity floor drops below where the oil film needs to be. Valvoline Daily Protection carries a moderate fuel dilution tolerance rating. AMSOIL Synthetic Blend carries a moderate high rating. On a base oil that already trends toward the lower end of the used oil viscosity window, after mechanical shear, Adding fuel dilution pressure to that equation compounds the thinning problem. The higher synthetic content in AMSOIL's base resists viscosity loss from fuel contamination better because synthetic molecular chains are uniform and less susceptible to polar interaction with fuel compounds than a refinery-derived Group 2 chain. For any turbocharged direct injection engine running a lot of city cold starts, that tolerance difference is not a minor footnote in the datasheet. It is the margin between the oil holding its film strength at the bottom of the drain interval and not. The total base number tells a different story, and this one is worth paying attention to if you push a synthetic blend toward the upper edge of its recommended drain window. Neither of these oils enters fresh with a high reserve. Valvoline Daily Protection starts at 6.5 to 7 milligrams of potassium hydroxide per gram. AMSOIL Synthetic Blend starts at 7 to 7.5 milligrams of potassium hydroxide per gram. These are entry-level blend numbers, a full unit to 2 units below what you see in dedicated extended drain full synthetics. By 4,000 to 5,000 miles, Valvoline depletes to approximately 1.2 to 1.8 milligrams of potassium hydroxide per gram. AMSOIL holds at 1.8 to 2.4 milligrams of potassium hydroxide per gram. The practical meaning of that gap is acid protection margin. At 1.2 remaining, Valvoline's acid-neutralizing chemistry is close to exhausted. AMSOIL's buffer is not gone at that same mileage. If your driving pattern pushes toward 5,000 miles on a blend change interval, that residual margin matters more than anything on the front of the bottle. The boron readings anchor the dispersancy difference between the two formulas. Valvoline Daily Protection comes back with 20 to 40 parts per million of boron remaining after use. AMSOIL Synthetic Blend comes back at 70 to 100 parts per million remaining. Boron is the chemistry that keeps combustion byproducts, fuel-diluted residue, and soot particulates suspended and in solution for the filter to capture. A low boron reading after 4,000 miles on a budget blend is not necessarily a failure, because the filter is doing its job on whatever the boron kept in suspension. But that gap in dispersancy reserve tells you the two oils are not operating with the same protection philosophy at all. Valvoline bought friction protection at the boundary layer with molybdenum. AMSOIL bought combustion byproduct management with boron. Both approaches have merit. They are not interchangeable. Calcium lands at 1,200 to 1,400 parts per million remaining in Valvoline, and 1,100 to 1,300 in AMSOIL. Magnesium runs at 400 to 600 in Valvoline and 500 to 700 in AMSOIL, a slight reversal where Valvoline leads on total calcium and AMSOIL leads on magnesium. Neither gap is large enough to drive a purchasing decision on its own. The zinc dialkyl-dithiophosphate readings land close as well. Valvoline holds 700 to 800 parts per million of zinc and 600 to 700 phosphorus after use. AMSOIL holds 750 to 850 zinc and 650 to 750 phosphorus. A small AMSOIL edge on anti-wear chemistry, not a significant separation. The verdict comes back to the base oil and what you are actually asking the oil to do. Valvoline Daily Protection is a conventional-leaning synthetic blend that uses a high molybdenum load to compensate at the boundary layer for what its petroleum-based stock cannot deliver in shear resistance. That formula works well for standard factory drain intervals in the 3,000 to 4,000 mile range, city and highway mixed use. Any engine that runs on time changes and does not stretch the window. AMSOIL Synthetic Blend is a different product with a different cost basis. Greater than 50% synthetic base oil, stronger dispersancy reserve through boron, better viscosity retention under sustained stress, better fuel dilution tolerance for the short-trip city driver, and a total base number margin that holds up better at the 5,000-mile ceiling of the blend category. The molybdenum number on the Valvoline bottle will look impressive on the datasheet. The AMSOIL viscosity and boron reserve at drain will look better over the same interval. Which reading you care more about is the question the used oil analysis is asking you to answer.